Friends, allies, and Americans, welcome to the Defense of Democracy podcast, where we tell the stories of folks who defend your children's rights by advocating for inclusive public school systems and who fight for diversity across our nation. I'm your host, Karen Swoboda. Let's get into it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Addison K. Witt, and welcome to the Defense of Democracy podcast. I'm the Poet Laureate of Defense of Democracy, and this is a place where we shine a light on the fight for freedom of expression. We celebrate the power of story and hear directly from those working on the front lines against censorship in America's schools and libraries. Each episode is about courage, creativity, and clarity because our democracy depends on all three. Today, I am honored to welcome Maggie Takuda-Hall, an author whose work is as imaginative as it is courageous. Maggie's debut picture book, Also an Octopus, is a whimsical celebration of storytelling, ending with one unforgettable image. I love this. A rocket scientist water skiing atop a rhino while wearing a colander on her head. It is reminding us that in story, anything is possible. She carried that boundless imagination into The Mermaid, The Witch, and the Sea, a young adult fantasy that explores colonialism, gender identity, and the power of knowing one's truth. Her graphic novel, Squad, takes on rape culture with biting humor and feminist fire, and her acclaimed picture book, Love in the Library, tells us the true story of how her grandparents met in a Japanese-American incarceration camp during World War II. A book that not only earned critical acclaim, but also sparked a national conversation about censorship and the courage to name racism plainly. There's so much more I can say, and I'll certainly leave room for you to contribute and talk about who you are, but I'm thrilled to have you here because this conversation also marks the beginning of our special series for Read Out Across America, happening October 5th through 11th. During Read Out, authors, educators, and advocates across the country will be lifting their voices in defense of the freedom to read. If you'd like to get involved, visit defenseofdemocracy.org/readout to learn how you can host or join an event, share your own readout, and stand with us in protecting the right to access stories without censorship. Maggie, please welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I've got a chance to look at a lot of your background, and as I was just pointing out, reading some of the intro there, you have a variegated background, so colorful and interesting. We were just talking about earlier how you come from a creative family and a family of storytellers, and I can only imagine how much that influenced your own artistry, your education, and your ability to stand on principles. How has that affected your life in the way that you see it?
I mean, absolutely. I don't know who I would be if I hadn't come from a family on both sides of such incredible storytellers, each in their own way. Basically, everyone in my family does creative work of some kind or another. And so when I said I wanted to be a writer, the general advice was just get a day job. Like nobody blinked. They just were hoping I had health insurance.
Yeah.
And it's, an honor to have told my grandparents on my mother's side's story in the way that I was able to do. My grandmother, Tama, whose story I tell in Love in the Library, was a really talented writer herself. And it was really important to me to close that book with words that she wrote in her own journal while she was incarcerated in Minidoka in Idaho during World War II, which was, the miracle is in all of us as long as we believe in beauty, in hope, in change. And that's what the book closes with. And it made me really proud to be able to use her words for her own story so that they could see print. Because when she was my age and younger and wanted to be a writer, she submitted to publishing houses and she'd get letters back that said things like, "You're so talented, you show a lot of promise, but nobody cares about Japanese people. Can you write about white people instead?" And she never got to have a book deal. She never got to have her novel. Like she told everybody when she was in the camps that she was going to be a novelist one day. And so it makes me very proud to carry some piece of her with me while I do the work that I do now.
I love that. And I often love how the DNA travels, right? When our forefathers, our great grandparents, great grandparents have had visions or things that they've wanted to accomplish and didn't always reach those goals, somehow it gets passed down. Not always, but there are those moments where it connects with those that come after, which is why I think it's so important that we always stand on what we believe. And it may not show up in the way that we're expecting, but somewhere down the road, it lives. And you are definitely a testament to that. Let's get into some of the questions that I have here for you. You said that writing is both a craft and a form of resistance. When did you first realize your stories could push back against injustice?
I don't think I ever worked within a framework where that wasn't true. I know that throughout my entire life, my sense of justice, my sense of fairness, my sense of what was right and the wrong in the world was formed by stories. And whether that was, the Torah, or that was just a story that my mother told me, like my the story of Love in the Library, the story of how my grandparents met, is a story I've known for my entire life. Like, the sky is blue, grandma and grandpa met in a prison camp, normal stuff. And so there was never a time before I thought about stories that way. I think I was always aware of them as being a way that we shine a light. We try to make the world a slightly better place. We allow ourselves to ask questions that we may not know the answers to. And all of that is in service of a future that might be better than the present that we are living.
Yeah, that when I'm a family historian, and from the very early days of my life, I remember sitting with my grandmother. She had 13 siblings, and I would sit with some of them as a child, and each one would give me information, the family genealogy, and tell me stories about each and every person. So I grew up knowing a lot about my great aunts and uncles more than most people in the family because those stories were accessible to me. And I love that. I love to this day. It's a very important part of my life. Your book, The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea, took, I believe, about 8 years to write during a time when
Uh-huh.
queer young adult stories were rare. And what kept you going, and what did you need that book to do to accomplish?
So I wrote The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea for a really particular kid.
Mm.
I used to be a children's bookseller, and for years, every Saturday, this girl, Claire, would come in with one of her parents, and she was so shy, she wouldn't even talk to me at first. And her parents would tell me about the last books she read. And then I would help her find three new ones. And the next week she'd come back and she'd have read all three and she'd need three more. And it was incredible. And I wanted to be her friend so badly. She was she was just a fascinating kid with fascinating taste. And one day when she was about 10, she just ran into the bookstore and was like, "Do you like Pokemon? Like, we've been talking this whole time." And I was like, "I'm in, finally." And I started tutoring her when she was about 11. And I mentored her in creative writing from that time until actually she graduated from college. I mentored her thesis novel project. And in the course of working with her on a weekly basis while she was a kid, I realized she was queer. She didn't have the language for it yet when she was like, 11, 12, 13. She just didn't know, but she really liked Melinda Lowe's book.
Mhm.
And she also really liked big fantasy novels with like high stakes, big world. Everything's exciting. It's life or death. There's magic, there's murder, there's kissing. And that was all the stuff I liked when I was that age too. When I was that age. That's all the stuff I like too. And so I wrote that book for her. I wanted her to have a queer romance that was set in that world where everything was big and exciting and the kisses were grand and everything was so important and romantic. And I started it when she was 13 and I finished it when she was 21. So not my most timely work, but it took me a really long time because I kept rewriting the beginning, just like over and over and over again, because I wanted it to be perfect before I moved on. And that's how I learned the hard way that you can't build a beautiful staircase to nowhere. and expect results. It just, that's not. And so after my first book came out in 2016, which was also an octopus, I was kind of sad because I didn't have anything lined up. And I was like, I guess that's it. I guess that's my career as an author, here and gone. And my husband and I were traveling together at the time. And he was like, how about this? Because he's a coder, like an engineer. He's like, we were traveling. So we had to do this. We were living out of a car as we drove through South America for about a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, what if we make a pact together that we're going to work an hour a day? I'll use that time to, like, he made an app before we left that was kind of passively earning income. And he's like, I'll make it really good. Like, I'll make sure that it's like really solid. And you work on your novel for an hour a day. And so I was like, all right. And I decided to do NaNoWriMo that year as a way to finally just push through to the ending. And I did. And it worked. It was a terrible first draft. It didn't make any sense. I had to throw out 2/3 of it. More, maybe 4/5. It was garbage. But it finally did the thing where I knew where the story was going and I could finally write through it. And so in that period of time, it only took me about 6 months to actually finish the book after taking 7.5 years to try to get a perfect beginning. So I don't write perfect beginnings anymore. I've given myself permission to just write bad first drafts and live with it. Which, you know, easier said than done. It's hard to write something and know it's not great.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I was really happy. To me, that book has done its job because I got to hand it to Claire. It was like in the middle of the pandemic, so I had to like leave it on her porch while she was home from college visiting her parents. And she picked it up and she like hugged it to her chest and we waved at each other. We had like a little bit of chit chat from the top and bottom of these stairs, and she read it and she loved it. And I was like, well, it's done. My work here is done. It was a little late. I could have done with handing it to her when she was 16. I think that would have made me really proud. But I'm glad that it got its single reader, and that was the most important part. So once she had the book and she read it and she loved it, I kind of felt like the book's job was done. It had served its single purpose, which was to be a queer romance for Claire. By the time I actually handed it to her, she was like out, proud, had several girlfriends, no longer maybe needed the book the same way she might have when she was 14 or 15. But I'm still extremely proud that it did its job.
As well you should be, because while it was a singular purpose, it certainly seems to be an extraordinary one, because it provided, number one, this inspiration for you to begin this journey. And through the relationship with Claire over time, you really got to know her, and also her personal development. I'm sure struggles that she encountered, from 10, 11, 12, 13 years old into young adulthood, and to see that and be able to inject into the book a lot of the truths and realities that a young person who is challenged by not only queer relationships or queer identity, but anyone that's going through the feeling of being othered, I would imagine. And so that now is a roadmap, or at least a space for inspiring other young people. And your books are also read by adults, not just young people as well. So you have a pretty wide audience there. And I also want to say too, what a great husband you have to come up with this supportive idea where you both are moving toward your goals. To have that indeed is very fortunate and lucky. So great on you.
Yeah, he's a babe.
Yeah, good for you. Good for both of you. Okay, so your grandparents' story, you spoke a little bit about that earlier. They certainly inspired love in the library. What was the emotional and political cost of telling that story so directly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the most stressed out I've ever been writing, like the most fearful, because there was so much responsibility with that story in a way that there hasn't been for the fiction I write. If you write fiction that misses the mark, it's just kind of like, well, oh well.
Yeah.
Like it won't be a success, or you'll feel a little cringy when you look at it, whatever. But with this one, I felt not just an obligation to my grandparents and my family, but also to the 125,000 Japanese Americans who were incarcerated in that period of time, to tell their story with respect and not to minimize their pain or the humiliation and the shame that they were subjected to for lies that the government told as a means of placating an angry public. And I just, I took that very, very seriously, and I felt really proud of where it ended up. And I always have to thank my mother for that, because she looked at early drafts of the book with me and helped me hone the tone of it so that it was walking the line, because their story is romantic and it is beautiful and it is hopeful. And it happened under unfathomably cruel circumstances that shouldn't have occurred at all and were representative of state-sanctioned racism and injustice. And both of those things have to be present on every single page, or you've missed the mark. And it is also a great testament to Yaz Imamura, who illustrated the book, of what an incredible job she did making sure that even in lovely romantic moments, you can see the guard tower in the background. You can tell that the light's a little too dark for where they are. There's little visual cues she gives you all throughout the book, so that while each one of her illustrations is beautiful, you never lose sight of where they are and what is happening around them. And I think that that is, I got to lean on that a lot as a writer, and it helped make the book into something that I feel extremely proud of and confident about. And that's not my work. It's just a testament to her.
It's so important to have a great relationship with an illustrator who really embraces, comprehends the thoughts, the ideas, the message, and to have a collaboration where you can have this symbiotic relationship that goes back and forth. You get to tell this amazing story, and then it's enhanced by clever and specificity in the illustration, whether it's sometimes simple, the illustrations, but effective, or big and broad and colorful. It just all depends on the individual. But again, in just talking with different authors, I see how so important that relationship is with your illustrator.
Yeah. I mean, illustrators are so exciting to work with for a lot of reasons. And the way that I think about it is I write my little text, I have my little ideas, and sometimes I have really prescriptive things that I write. Like the opening page of Love in the Library, it does describe that she's walking underneath a guard tower. And that page is exactly the way that I pictured it. But there's a page where she's sitting down and she's looking at books and imagining all the beautiful things that are happening in them and the world that is kind of taken away from her because she's in this camp. And the way that Yaz drew it was so much better than anything I could have possibly imagined. She used these sort of like ethereal, ghostly forms of all these beautiful things happening around Tama's mind. And it was so beautiful. And it was so like empathetic the way that she drew it. And I'm just really grateful to have worked with her. And I'm really excited. We have 2 more books coming out together over the next few years. And I basically will just keep finding ways to shoehorn myself into her career for as long as she'll let me, because I think she's one of the most talented illustrators working right now.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's, there's nothing like having the perfect relationship or great relationship, whether it's with your hairstylist that you want to hang on to, you're a great mechanic, or someone that services or assists you in making your work better. Nothing like that experience. Let's move on to a different area and talk a little bit about book bans and institutional censorship. January 24th, the big decision. The Department of Education eliminated the book ban coordinator and dismissing civil rights complaints. What does that tell us about where we are in our country today? Please help us understand where we are today.
We're under unconsolidated authoritarian power. We have a president who is an authoritarian, who's doing his best to eliminate checks on his power and is being incredibly effective at it. And one of the steps that is necessary for authoritarians to consolidate their power is to limit the power of academia and the freedom of information. And eliminating a book ban coordinator is just one of the ways that he's making sure that our public institutions of learning cannot protect themselves from attacks from the dark moneyed right that is using book bans as a way to defund those very institutions. A lot of the people who fund these things don't believe in the separation of church and state, and they are trying to make sure that public schools adhere to a Christian value system, Christian as they define it, not necessarily Christian as I think many Christians would agree with. And some of them just don't believe in something as basic as a public good. I think you can trace a lot of this back to desegregation. As soon as they realized that they were going to have to pitch in for people who weren't white, they stopped believing in public institutions. And so the elimination of a book ban coordinator is just one of the things you do to disempower public institutions of learning from protecting themselves.
It really is an inflection point in our country, in the nation. And it's interesting. I look at it in terms of, oftentimes when we look at ourselves, we are focused on what's happening right now in our world. With that being said, there is a future world, and the decisions that are made now will have a tremendous impact on what happens to future human beings, whether it's our children or our children's children. It's going to shift. The decisions today will shift the world. What do you say to people who still think that book bans are isolated, or that it's just an exaggeration? It's only happening in small pockets and we're exaggerating. This isn't really a big deal.
I'd say that the data doesn't back that up.
Mm.
I would congratulate them for living in a place where it's not an issue that they have to think about. That seems nice. But that's just not the reality that's on the ground. Every year since 2020, we've seen a marked increase in the number of book bans that have happened every year. And one of the developments that's happened between 2024 and 2025 that's really dark that I think we should all be aware of is that book bans, according to the American Library Association, 72% of book complaints, of challenges that come to books in our public libraries, don't come from parents who are concerned about what their children have access to, don't come from just a degular community member. They come from moneyed special interest groups and from legislatures. State legislatures are taking away more book access than any one individual is. There was a report that ran, or not a report, an article that ran in the Washington Post maybe 3 or 4 years ago about how basically 11 people in the United States were responsible for something like 80% of book challenges in the whole country. And that's no longer the landscape that we're looking at. It's not a few weirdos sharing bigoted spreadsheets anymore, although they're still there and they are organized and they are active. It is legislatures, it is state legislators. There are anti-freedom to read advocates on school boards all across the nation. And so I'm glad that this hypothetical person has not had to face that in their own community, and I hope that it stays that way for that person. I would love for book bans to feel deeply irrelevant to all of us, frankly. I would love them to feel the way that they felt in the 90s when everybody was just like mad at scary stories to tell in the dark for being too scary.
Yeah.
I would love to go back into those days, because the argument of, well, it is in the title, maybe you should have read the title before you checked out the scary book and then got scared. There was a warning. They did tell you exactly what you were getting. Scary stories. But that's not what we're dealing with anymore. We're dealing with people who are trying to defund all of our public institutions of learning and using easily inflamed bigots to get it done.
And you alluded to this, or you discussed it slightly earlier, but I want to be even more specific. What is it about literature that makes such a target for those who are in power?
Right.
Why are they so afraid of literature, the words on the page?
Every despot in history has understood that narrative contains the seeds of their undoing. They all understand that intrinsically, that the freedom of information will always be a threat to them. There's a reason why art history is a bloody history. And that's exactly it. Artists' job is to hold up a mirror to society and to show us who we are, but also show us who we could be. And that is extremely threatening to somebody who wants our imaginations limited, who wants us to feel like there is no escape, like we cannot do any better, like this is the only world that there could possibly be, and that they are the only person who can provide us with any kind of safety. That is such an easily debunked myth about anyone. And the easiest way to debunk it is with a story. And there's always going to be millions of stories that debunk the power of a despot, which is why the first attacks always come for stories.
Wow, this is so great. And one of the things that we do with Defense of Democracy podcast is to highlight a volunteer. And I'll take this moment right now to talk about Marky Braley. She is a dedicated honors student at St. John's School in Houston, Texas, with remarkable commitment to community service, advocacy, and justice. Passionate about pursuing a future in law, Marley focuses on addressing issues that impact underserved communities, from justice reform and educational equity to infrastructure improvement. I mentioned Marley because she is a young person in high school, and I have relocated to Texas recently from LA, and I've met so many incredible young people who are volunteering and putting it on the line. I'm blown away. I'm impressed, and she is running the entire Texas organization there through Defense of Democracy, and so many of them. It really is encouraging in terms of our future, seeing so many young people really get involved.
I have to say, whenever I feel hopeless, which is frequently right now, if I'm being frank, I think about Texas and I think about Florida and these places that have really, I mean, Texas is really going Christo-fascist. Florida is just going straight up fash. And they have been more organized for years and years and years. And, you know, things have really dissolved there. Democracy has really come crumbling down in those states in a lot of ways. But when I look at the activists who are working there and how fearless they are and how persistent they are and how, you know, just dogged they are, and I realize, and I see them do things like almost have a clean sweep of school board elections last time in Texas. And I go, okay, there's always hope. If we can win in Texas,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Texas, we might be able to turn a lot of this around, because the most mature activists, the most mature apparatuses that exist in our country exist in places like Florida and Texas. And I am so grateful for their labor, not just for what they are, you know, directly doing, but for the hope that they give us, like, frankly, lily-livered blue state people who have never had to fight like that.
Yeah.
We just haven't had to fight quite the same way as they have had to fight. And I am so grateful for their leadership and for their example, because I'm looking to it a lot right now.
I have to tell you, in being here, I really have been quite surprised at the groundswell, at the boots on the ground. It's almost, I have friends who have flown in, have visited here, and have commented on relationships in Texas, even interracial relationships. There's something that has shifted here that is very positive and forward moving. It's not widely discussed. It's just a Texas thing. I think Texas is far more purple than we realize.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
There are a lot of people here that are trying to help overturn the atrocities that occur at the upper echelon and leadership, who, of course, through their gerrymandering and manipulation, are always positioning themselves to win. Republicans versus Republicans. You hear many people talk about their districts. They don't even have a Democratic person to vote for. And that's part of the culture here. But you're right. There are people that are on the ground that are fighting to make a change and make a difference every day in this state. And I'm definitely in support of them. Just a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up with everything. I do want to end on a high note. There was so much to talk about, obviously, that we didn't get to discuss. and you have a lot to say, and I love having this conversation with you. In terms of what you're looking forward to, what is it that you want your books to do with your work, with your advocacy, or just reaching people? What is your dream? What do you want to see happen?
I would love for them to become irrelevant.
Mm.
I've written a lot of really direct books about certain things, about sexism, about rape culture, about state-sanctioned racism, about colonialism, about government cruelty. And I would love for a kid to pick up that book and go, "This is so old-fashioned. This has nothing to do with my reality." I would love for my books to go out of print because of that. I think that would be neat. I would love for them to look at Squad, which is a book that takes place where I grew up, that's very much about rape culture, and for a teenage girl to read it and go, "Oh my God, it was so messed up back then," and never think about it again. I think that would be delightful. I would love to be turning over in my grave, cackling to myself that my books have gone out of print and no one cares anymore because they're irrelevant.
I had a question earlier, which is, if a young person finds your book under their bed in 2045, what do you hope it will mean to them? And I think you've just
Nothing.
clearly answered. You've just answered that, and that's brilliant. What a testament to who you are, and actually knowing where you are in this moment, and using your voice and your platform to communicate with people, to reach out, to advocate on behalf of others. It's a beautiful thing. Before we close, what one positive thing are you looking forward to the next week, the next month? What's something exciting that you are anticipating?
Well, I'm the president of an organization called Authors Against Book Bans. And for Banned Books Week this week, all across the country, we're going to be working with people all around to try to put on events where people can get to know their school board members. Our feeling is when fascism goes federal, we need to go really local and start building up and shoring up our power from the ground level up so that it is more increasingly difficult to send mandates down that are illiberal and cruel and unjust. And so getting to know your school board members is something I'm really excited about. I have already bothered mine in Oakland, California about this. It isn't a place where we are known for our book bans, but that doesn't mean it's never coming for us. And in fact, we're seeing a real rise of it happening in sort of safely blue areas. And so I'm very excited about that.
Very good. Well, we're very excited that you were here to share that and so much more with us. It has been indeed a pleasure talking with you. I'm Addison Witt with the Defense of Democracy podcast. And for those of you that have been listening, this is Maggie Takuda-Hall, and it has been indeed a pleasure. If you're interested in getting involved with Defense of Democracy or contributing in any way to Defense of Democracy, we welcome your support. Thank you for being with us, and we will see you next time where we are here to talk about the truth. Thanks so much.